Second half of the NBA season will begin Friday night as the Cavs begin the second half in New Orleans against Zion Williamson and company. We'll have Cavs Live with Jeff Phelps and Campy Russell for you at 7:30. And the tip-off at 8 with John Michael, Austin Carr, Angel Gray over on your home for Cavaliers basketball, our sister network, Fox Sports Ohio. Cavs basketball is presented by Hyundai. Joining us now is Spencer Davies, who is the senior NBA editor, basketballnews.com, formerly of the Akron Beacon Journal, and also formerly worked for us here at Fox Sports Ohio and SportsTime Ohio, digital production. Congratulations are in order for you, Spencer. I don't have to ask how you're doing.
I appreciate that, Bruce. It's good to be back home.
The NBA All-Star Weekend, if you will, now completed. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, a lot of people had a lot of down thoughts about it going into it because of what with the pandemic and who would be participating and who would not be participating. But I think that ultimately it ended up being a decent success. We had some fun times during the game. If you watch Steph Curry and Damian Lillard fire off half-court shots back-to-back, you know, the dunk contest was a little bit of a downer, but the three-point contest was really fun. I think overall they did a decent job of getting it done. But it obviously had a little bit different of a feel with less of a fan environment thing to do with it. But a lot of good things came out of it, especially towards those HBCUs and the donations that they got.
I understand that James's team wore the uniforms they did because they're the Indiana Pacers, and the game was originally going to be in Indianapolis, right?
It was. And then this is why it kind of had a bad feel to it, because it felt like the NBA had scrapped this idea for an all-star game with the Pacers and the Indiana setting. But the problem was they renegotiated this all-star game to happen in Atlanta kind of off the cuff in a way. And that's why a lot of the players were kind of taken aback by it. They thought they were just going to have a break for, you know, this decent week or so. But they ultimately came to a decision between the Players Association and the NBA to hold it in Atlanta, and that's how they did it. And they did it all in one night.
What'd you think of the choosing up sides, so to speak?
The draft itself, I think it's always entertaining when you see players play GM. LeBron obviously likes to, you know, get some really talented players on his team. And it's funny because a lot of people look into that as if it's some way of recruitment over to his teams in LA and whatnot. But the discourse, it's very real. And, you know, whether people liked it or not, you know, his comments on the Jazz were, you know, pretty funny because it was on a national stage and everyone's been poking fun at guys like Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert for a while. But LeBron just had some fun with that, saying he doesn't pick Jazz because he never did growing up. Playing video games with Karl Malone and John Stockton and whatnot. I thought that was a funny quote. And then same thing with Kevin Durant, you know, just the banter back and forth, I think is a really fun environment and a little different of way things that we're used to.
Spencer, did you hear that Vegas put out the over-under at 319.5 and the final score was 170 to 150?
And that's really funny because I have a lot of friends who do some betting. So I was actually told like 318 before the game started. But that's a hurtful one right there, isn't it, Bruce?
My goodness gracious. It's amazing how they come up with this stuff. All right, let's switch gears to the serious side of the NBA. Deadline approaching. Are the Cavs going to be able to make a deal? I don't want to say rid themselves of Drummond, but certainly that contract.
Well, you know, it's kind of hard to kind of put that into a prediction. So with Andre Drummond, it's really tough because of the $28.7 million contract, as you know, getting teams to just match that period. But then you take into consideration that he's an expiring contract, and he's also at a position where the NBA is going away from that more traditional look. So it's not as easy to really put a deal together, especially when teams, you know, don't have that reason to go get somebody like that with the evolving league that it is. But there are deals out there that the Cavs can make one-on-one, just a few of them, But teams I have my eye on are someone like New York Knicks. I have my eye on someone like the Sacramento Kings, maybe. I did an article for basketballnews.com detailing a couple of those trade packages that could work. Dallas Mavericks, another one to think about, even though they've been reportedly interested in Kevin Love. But it just all has to do with what do they find worth it? What do teams find worth with Andre Drummond, and if they can get that contract match? Because a lot of people are suiting up for Andre Drummond to possibly be available via buyout. The problem with that is, though, Andre Drummond doesn't want to leave his bird rights on the table, which means it could be more money in the offseason. So that's another sticking point there when it comes to the Cavs not wanting to do a buyout with Drummond and Drummond not wanting to leave money on the table.
You know, it's funny how he started off this season, doubles like crazy and really good numbers, but the Cavs lost the majority of those games.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, that just tells you what kind of league we're in right now. It's a lot of three-point shooting. It's a fast-paced league. You got to be able to run the floor, space out, be a three-point threat in order to really create those driving lanes for the guards that the Cavs have, like Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. So during that period, the Cavs were just trying to play grinded-out basketball. They were missing guys here and there. They had to play two-way contract guys like Lamar Stevens. A former two-way contract guy like Dean Wade was getting a lot of minutes. So during that period when they were missing, their top players, such as Colin Sexton, sometimes when he had that ankle injury, Darius Garland was out here and there. They haven't had Kevin Love since the beginning of December, and Larry Nance Jr., somebody who was leading the league in steals when he went down. So it kind of just made for like the perfect storm in a way. But Andre Drummond being the focal point of your offense in 2020 is probably not ideal.
You mentioned Kevin Love. Any word on him being dealt, and if so, to whom?
Well, I'm asked about this all the time when it comes to Kevin Love, and it feels like he's been in the trade mill ever since he got to Cleveland. No matter what the record's been, no matter what the situation of the team is. I just don't see a deal for Kevin Love coming to fruition. One, because of the injury history. Two, because of how much money is in that contract. And three, the Cavs probably wouldn't get back what they want for such a lucrative deal in return, because they value his presence as a locker room guy, somebody who's really taken a liking to Colin Sexton, Darius Garland, just being that veteran voice. It's just kind of irreplaceable in their eyes at the moment. I know there's a lot of rumors and stuff that come up with Kevin and, going back home to Portland. I know he's been linked to the Mavericks. He's been linked to a couple other teams. But to actually make that deal happen, it's even harder, one, to do than a Drummond deal because he's making $4 or $5 more million than him a year. And secondly, he's a little older and he has the injury history. So I just don't see a deal happening for Kevin Love anytime soon. And that's something we'll revisit, I'm sure, in the summer. Do
you think the Cavs will make any deal?
You're putting me on the spot there. I think they can make an Andre Drummond deal happen, and here's why. Kobe Altman has done favors for some teams in the past, being facilitator of deals, being that third team to either take on a big contract or to just make a trade work. I think some other teams would do a favor for the Cavs like that because of that history. And secondly, I think it'll happen in a multi-team deal for Andre Drummond and not just a one-on-one deal, just because of the difficulty of matching salaries and whatnot. But I do think they will make a deal. Kobe is very active at the trade deadline. We've seen it in the past. Last year, he surprised us all by getting Andre Drummond, even though it didn't cost much. This season, he's probably going to get less of a return than what he got. But I feel like it's going to be, an addition by subtraction type of move. And that's not saying anything bad about Drummond. Professional. This was a mutually agreed upon situation when it came to sitting him on the sidelines and making sure that he stays healthy while they search for a deal. This whole Jared Allen situation came up out of nowhere, or else I bet that Andre Drummond would have been a long-term fit. So there's no bad blood there. I think it's a mutual thing. And I do think that the Cavs will find a deal.
Spencer, what do you envision for the Cavs? I'm not talking about the 21-22 season, but the 22-23 season, could they be an NBA championship contender?
championship contender, I cannot go that far. It all depends on if they consistently show signs of improvement. We are seeing their core right now do some very good things. It was a very tough 10-game losing streak. We all know that. But if you look at that schedule, it was just brutal. If you look at what happened in the last 5 games, and yes, they did just lose to the Pacers, but that was kind of a thing where they shot themselves in the foot with all of those turnovers. I think that you see the real potential in what Colin Sexton and Darius Garland can do with one another. Darius Garland, I think in the last 3 or 4 out of the last 5 games, has had 8 or more assists. Colin Sexton also getting others involved, but also more willing to take threes when guys go under on screens. There's just so much to like about Jarrett Allen, who is somebody that knows what he's good at and sticks to it. And there's still more to be tapped into as far as his potential goes. And then you just look at what Isaac Okoro's been doing on the defensive end. We know he's been consistent on that end all year, and that's affected his offensive production. But he's been more aggressive in the very beginning of March and the end of February, to where he's not too afraid to take a shot or to take it inside and finish. So that is your core right there. That is the core 4 that the Cavs have. And I think around that squad, because they're all 22, 21 years old, and have some continuity and have the same coaching staff and have the same front office, that can do wonders for a core like that to establish a chemistry and to establish a comfortability, so to speak. And it all is going to start too as well when Colin Sexton has an extension talk next fall. Whether Jarrett Allen comes back, and I do think he will be back for sure on a big deal coming this summer, because he's a restricted free agent, and the Cavs can match any deal that he is offered. So, those contract situations speak for themselves, but this is the core 4 that they're going to roll with. And I think that it's going to be a good thing.
I have a problem with the lottery, the way it's set up with the NBA, and have for a long time. Don't you think it should be the order of drafting, like the other leagues, based on your final record, rather than this lottery and then the luck or unluck of the draw?
Well, I think I would put the blame on Sam Hickey there, because he's the one that started this whole tanking phenomenon. The reason that the NBA did it this way is because they want to incentivize teams to start playing to win. They don't want to see a bad product out there. They don't want to see teams actively trying to lose. And I think that also comes into effect with the play-in tournaments that they've put in. The 7 through 10 seeds all, get into the playoff mix at the end of the season now in both the Eastern and Western Conference. So you have teams that might have been trying to bottom out, but have been kind of persuaded to compete and to try and build a winner. I was never an advocate for tanking. I think that it's very detrimental to your culture if you're trying to tell the players that you're not there to win. That's not a good strategy to attract players to come in free agency or via trade. That's not an attractive thing for a coach to want to come to. That's just sending the wrong message. If you're trying to compete yet you're still losing, I feel like more people will respect that. And in turn, you should be rewarded for that. Unfortunately, in the Cavaliers case, it's been like both of bad luck. They've been losing, but they've also gotten the 8th pick, the 5th pick, the 5th pick, which has been hard for Kobe Altman to establish a superstar caliber player to lead them into the future. They don't have that person to build around right now. The closest would be Colin Sexton in his 3rd year. But I think if they do get that top 3 pick and they do get that superstar that is waiting in the wings to just blossom and be that go-to guy, then you're talking about the situation of getting closer and inching to a championship. But I'm with you. I don't know if I'm a fan of the tanking strategy, and also I'm not a fan of of the way they've changed the lottery myself.
Yeah, I mean, the worst place to be in the NBA is making it as the 7th or 8th seed. I mean, it's the worst possible place to be, especially the way the NBA allows the certain franchises to load up as the Lakers have for years. Boston has done this in the past. Miami, when LeBron went down there with Bosh, and et cetera, et cetera. And a perfect example of that is who's going to beat Brooklyn in the East this year? Okay, maybe it'll happen. Miami pulled off a bubble upset a year ago. And you can't make a case really for anybody in the West except for to beat the Lakers, except Utah or the Clippers, where in the other sports, you've got a lot more possibilities to win those respective championships, no?
Yeah. And I think that's a conversation that comes down to why does the regular season matter? Because you know that some of these teams do coast. Some of them don't take it quite as seriously as others. It's not an easy situation to come to a solution because you cannot control players' instincts. You can't control what players are doing. It's a player-driven league, as we know. A lot of guys like to buddy up. A lot of guys like to play with their friends. And then some guys also don't mind sacrificing their quote unquote legacy to go win a championship. We saw it this year with James Harden. He flat out said that the Rockets didn't have what it took to get done. Never heard that in a public, declared in public that blatantly before. But ultimately got his way. He's over in Brooklyn now with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And that's, like you said, the Nets are one of the favorites in the Eastern Conference. But Bruce, I can't really put forth a solution because you can't change a mindset. It's just not possible.
Spencer Davies, senior NBA editor, basketballnews.com. Check out his great work. Again, congratulations, Spencer. We'll have you on again. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, Bruce.
All right, we're going to jump into your calls now, so let's go diving at 844-289-1421. That's next.